Hello, I'm Shane Bybee. I've worked with students for almost 30 years and have spent the last 10 years guiding high school students on their journey to college. One thing I've discovered is that everyone's college experience is different, and that's what this podcast is about. What are the things families need to know about college? Today, we're meeting with Ariel Szekely, and I need to pronounce Ariel Szekely's name for you because it's one of the more difficult. Back-to-back episodes now. We had Niedewitz in the last episode, and now Szekely in this. Are you hearing me?
Yes, sorry, it cut out for a second there.
Oh, okay. I was saying, how close am I to the actual pronunciation of your name?
Do you want the Americanized pronunciation or the proper Hungarian? Okay, American.
Let's do it.
We'll start with that. No, you're pretty close. I say Szekely, so
okay,
almost there.
All right, Szekely. And I only taught you for 2 years, so you'd think I'd have it down by now. We've only known each other for 6 or 7 years now.
Yeah.
So Szekely. Okay, what's the proper Hungarian pronunciation?
The Hungarian pronunciation is CK.
Okay.
It's like letter C, letter K. So that one's a lot easier, actually.
Yeah, like someone who we probably won't remain nameless who you're related to.
That sounds good.
All right.
For the better.
He's making a comeback. He's getting back in there.
So I hear.
All right. That's gonna be a fun family reunion someday. All right.
Absolutely.
Ariel, would you tell us kind of where you are, what you're doing?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a first-year PhD student here at MIT up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm studying my PhD in computer science with a focus on a mixture between computer security and operating systems, which probably sounds very boring, but I think it's fun. And just before this, I did my undergrad at UT Austin in computer science as well. And I was in the honors CS program there, which I really enjoyed. So just getting used to the grad student life now.
Okay. Well, what's been the big, what are you having to get used to?
Yeah, there's been a lot of changes. Undergrad is, grad school is completely different, especially PhD. In undergrad, you're sort of taking a lot of classes. I was also doing a bunch of research to try and get into grad school and all this. In grad school, you have basically complete control over your own schedule. My PhD program here is about 6 years long on average. It can go a bit longer depending on your goals. But yeah, over those 6 years, I need to take 4 classes total, 4 one-semester classes. So I'm basically taking 1 class per semester. It's about the same level as the undergrad classes I was taking in terms of difficulty. And then the rest of my time is just entirely mine to fill up however I'd like. So it's a lot more freedom. No one really tells you what to work on. You have to learn how to pick the right research problems to work on and how to develop this sense of what's scientifically interesting and what's important to the field. So these are some of the new challenges I'm dealing with is how to pick the right problem, I guess. That's been the main challenge.
Have you narrowed down the list of possibilities so far?
Yeah, I think so. I'm working on a project that I'm pretty excited about. And it's we don't have like a clear vision of what the research contribution is going to be, what the novelty is going to be, but we have a general sense of the area that we'd like to explore in. So more or less what we'd like to do is make data centers, which take up about 2% of the US's energy budget right now, more energy efficient. And actually that number is expected to grow to 8 to 10% in the next 10 years. So a huge amount of electricity and energy is being consumed by these data centers, and we'd like to make them more energy efficient. Right now they're operating at like 20 to 60% efficiency by estimates of Google, Microsoft, and all these big companies. So there's a lot of ground to be gained there, and I think it has the potential to have really big impact in terms of technological advancement and to the environment as well. It's an important problem.
Very cool. I don't want to. You have to guard those proprietary secrets and all. What are you? What seems to be the inefficiencies?
Yeah, no, not proprietary secrets at all. So there's, I don't want to get too technical, just because I don't want to bore you. There's no secrets by any means, but basically the problem is that these data centers have to be prepared to have very uneven and unexpected spikes in load. So as you might expect, the number of people checking Facebook isn't uniform throughout the whole day. If you check the number of people. If you look at the number of people checking Facebook at like midnight in the US, there's probably not going to be that many online. But if there's some catastrophic event or something like that, all of a sudden there's an enormous spike in the number of people looking at the website, and that exerts a much higher demand on the infrastructure and resources of these data centers. So in order to be able to accommodate these unexpected spikes, these data centers generally have to run with a lot of headroom. They have to have a bunch of extra machines and computers up and running, just in case all of a sudden something happens and millions or billions of people start checking Facebook at the same time. They don't want everything to sort of crash and burn unexpectedly. So the problem is that they have to sort of over-provision these resources, and we're trying to reorganize how you do this data center computing, so you don't need to over-provision as much. You can sort of scale out and have a lot more of an elastic service without having to deal with a lot of the headache and overhead management of on the engineering side of things.
Okay, so let's work backwards from that. So that's kind of where you are, and that's so cool. So PhD, you've got 4 classes you're going to take, and then you're going to work on solving a problem, right? So that's going to be like the big focus of getting the PhD. And it's a direct PhD, because I mean, I started a master's degree decades ago in English, right? And the track then for an English major was you got your master's degree, and then you went on to a PhD program and you worked on a PhD thesis. Sounds like very different, because you're not going to do a master's first and then go on to a PhD. You're just going to go direct to a PhD. But not significantly different, because it would have been basically the same process. But how did you talk about your path to getting to where you are now? Like, how did you end up discovering that as a research process? You said you were honors computer science at UT. Yeah,
definitely. So I was in this small honors program at UT which is part of the computer science department. It's called the Turing Scholars Honors Program. And it was absolutely fantastic. It's a really small program. It's research focused. So the idea is that they'd like to have you write a research thesis by the end of your senior year. Hopefully, I think the purpose of the program is to get students involved in research early, so that they can go to grad school if they're interested in doing that. That's definitely something that I had in my head coming in. My dad got a PhD and is a professor, and so I'd always had that had always been sort of in the back of my mind, that it would be nice to sort of continue my education. This program really sort of jump-started that, I think. I started doing research in the second semester of my sophomore year, continued working with the same professor throughout the rest of college, and then started working with another fantastic advisor as well in the last sort of year and a half. And fortunately, with all the setup and a lot of luck, I have to admit as well, I was well set up for PhD applications come senior year, and then things went well. I was lucky to have some choices, and ended up here where I'm very happy right now.
Yeah. Well, what were all your choices for grad school?
Yeah, so I was lucky to have a difficult choice, which did not earn me a lot of sympathy from my friends, as I'm sure you can imagine. So I was choosing between MIT, Stanford, Berkeley, Georgia Tech, I think, UT, of course, I think UPenn. So there may have been a couple more here or there, but when it really came down to it, it was between Stanford, MIT, and Berkeley, and just because of my advisor interests and the student culture here, and all this, and a few other factors, MIT ended up being the best choice, and I'm really happy I ended up here.
So you said student culture was one of the factors.
Yeah.
In your perspective, what captures the difference in the student culture? Because I'm sure Stanford and Berkeley have a very different culture between those two, and then of course MIT, you've got the coastal differences. What were the student culture differences?
Yeah, definitely. And I think so. There's sort of two cultures that you have to consider when you're picking a grad school or PhD program. There's the general program culture, and there's the lab culture, because a lot of your social life is lab centric when you're in a PhD.
Just for like, a lot of your social life is lab centric when you're in a PhD. That's such a great statement.
I realize how that sounds now after I said it.
I love it.
But yeah, no. So it seemed like they're all fantastic places, and I feel very lucky to have had the opportunity to go to all of them. I think in terms of social, the sort of social life and attitude of the programs, what I really liked about MIT is that firstly, all the students were really chatty and seemed to get along well with one another and know each other well, even across labs. So that was nice to see that people seem to be social and not just robots, which is definitely something you want to watch out for when you're choosing grad schools, I think. And then within my lab, there are 3 or 4 people who really like doing outdoor stuff. I'm a huge fan of hiking and sport and exercise. I think physical fitness is super important. I think it's a big reason why I'm here now. And so there are a lot of people who clearly had a decent work-life balance, and it seemed like the group got together and played board games, and it seemed like it was a tight-knit group, and people got along well. So that was really important to me. I knew that I'd be spending a lot of time with them, probably more time with them than with my advisor. So you need to feel like you can get along with these people, since you're going to be spending the better part of the next decade with them. So.
Yeah, that's got some great foresight. What made you do, because you had a lot of opportunities coming out of high school as well. What made you choose UT over the other schools you could have gone? What, maybe a short list of the schools that you were choosing between, that you were really thinking between? What made you choose UT?
Yeah, so I actually didn't apply to a ton of places coming out of high school. I was pretty sure I was going to go to UT. So I applied to only 4 colleges coming out of high school. I applied to MIT, Caltech, Carnegie Mellon, and UT Austin. And I got into Carnegie Mellon and UT Austin. And so there are a couple different things. One of the things that I really liked about UT is that this honors program was small and had this research focus. So you get a lot more one-on-one face time with professors as a result. It seemed like everyone really knew each other. It's only about like 50 people per year. And so you're taking the same classes with the same people all the way through. So you really get to know your group and get to know who to talk to if you need help on a theory subject or on like a system subject. You might know, who to go to, I guess, in a moment of stress or whatever. So I really liked that. And I really liked that it was, people seemed cheerful and people seemed to have a good work-life balance. I thought that was really important in college. I think, it's really important to develop, especially now in retrospect. I think it's really important to develop in more than one way, more than just technically and academically. I think you need to develop as a person as well. And I got the sense that UT would really give me the space to do that while still having very challenging academics and still being a top 5, top 10 CS program. So that seemed like a great combination to me, and I'm overjoyed that I went there. Would do it again for sure.
I think you strike one of the things that I try to stress to people. So you were into the UT, the honors program for computer science. And a lot of parents are going to be asking, well, how does that work? And they just need to know that like the admissions for honors programs at different schools is very different for every school. At some schools, you have to apply to the university and be accepted and then apply to the honors separately. At some schools, you apply to begin with, like it's the beginning thing you have to do. Different schools have different ways of handling that. Roughly how many students were in the computer science major overall at UT? Not just the honors, but the whole major.
Yeah, so I'd say it was about 450 to 500 per year, and then 40 or 50 honors students on top of that.
And so my advice to people always is, whenever you start looking at a school, figure out, I mean, if you, depending on what you're wanting to do after, right? If your plan is to get your degree and then do your own business and not even worry about anything else, then maybe if you're going to start your own company, things like that, maybe it's not as big a deal. But my challenge for students coming out of high school is always figuring out a place where academically you're going to be in the top third. Now I'm talking to someone who got accepted to Carnegie Mellon, whose computer science department has about I'm talking to you, has about a 2% acceptance rate. So, I'm in this episode, I'm talking with someone who has that. Like, you accepted to one program that has a 2% acceptance rate, and then to an honors program at a university that already has it has, because of auto admissions, UT's acceptance rate is going to seem higher than it actually is. But then you were not just that, I talk with students sometimes who want to do, business college at A&M. Mays is a great business school. And the average SAT score at A&M, I think, is like a 1300. Business is probably a little bit higher than that. The average SAT score for the honors college, for Mays Business Honor College last year, was a 1480. Right? That's getting close. I mean, anytime you hit that 1520 threshold, that's kind of the top level threshold, or the average SAT scores.
Yeah.
So if you can, when people start looking at schools, and I do talk with students a lot of times, like, oh, I want to go to MIT, and I'm like, well, why? And they're like, well, because it's MIT. Well, that's not a good reason, right? What's the program you want to study? What does that school offer you, specific programs, other than thinking that you're going to get like a rubber stamp that says, hey, now you've graduated, you can do whatever. And that's really not it.
Yeah.
And you got a third student, or you go to Mays at A&M, where you're at the average student walking in, or to Texas Tech, which I have my bias, right? But or to go to Texas Tech, where you're a little bit more of the upper end, and now you're going to have more opportunities for leadership, for internship, for research. And let's talk about that, because you did something really cool as a research project when you were an undergrad. And I'd love for you, as much of it as before the CIA comes knocking on my door, as much of it as you're allowed to talk about, or your door, on your undergrad research project.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I was lucky to work on a couple different things in undergrad with some fantastic advisors, Chris Rossbach and Emmett Witchell, who are my undergraduate research advisors. And yeah, so one thing that I worked on, I think the main project that helped me get into grad school, was trying to reveal vulnerabilities in how we do cloud computing. So oftentimes, if, say, I have a small business, a little bakery or something, and I want to put up a website, I'm probably not going to have the infrastructure, the money, the personnel to set up a data center with 10,000 computers, or even like a few computers, and manage them properly to run my website. So oftentimes people will just use a built-in service that does that for you. Like Amazon has its offering called Amazon AWS, Google has Google Cloud, so on and so forth. And so this is all well and good, but maybe but in order to use their computers, I have to sort of trust them fully. If I upload my customer data to them, I have to trust them not only that they're not going to look at the customer data, but also that that they did things right, meaning that they got the security problems right. So if someone breaks into Amazon, then they have my data as well, potentially. And this may sound like a little bit too tinfoil hat to you, but
no, it's 100% dangerous.
Yeah, no, and there are real business cases where Amazon would be incentivized actually to look at its customers' data. Netflix famously runs almost all of its services in the Amazon cloud, and Netflix is probably one of Amazon's biggest competitors in terms of the online video market. So I'm sure Amazon would love to take a peek at the secret source that Netflix is running and using right now on their cloud. So it's incredibly important, I think, to sort of be able to use their computing resources without having to trust them fully. And so there have been some proposals about how to do this, and how to do this with this sort of new exciting hardware that's been coming out lately, GPUs, for example, and other hardware accelerators, which make things run much more energy efficiently and much more quickly. And the work I did sort of showed that this isn't quite, the current work isn't quite enough. You can still, Amazon or whoever could still get around these defenses, which the research community has proposed. And in fact, we needed a more complete solution in order to completely protect people's data when they're computing on untrusted hardware. So this is more or less the problem that I was working on, and that's what I wrote my thesis on, and then helped me get into grad school.
I mean, one of the things I don't think people understand, because it's the encryption idea, right? You talk about a bakery, but it's my business too, because everything I do for my company, it's someone logs into my website. My website is hosted at a particular hosting company, so all that data is there. It's maintained through WordPress, which is one of the biggest. I don't understand how all of it works, right? But I know that WordPress is where I use to design and update things on my website. All of that's there. But the credit card information, when someone comes into my site, like that never comes into my company. Like that's even handled by a third-party processor because of the laws involved, right? I don't want to have that credit card information with me, because I recognize that I don't have the infrastructure to protect someone's credit card information. So I never actually have access to it. But then there's a company that I'm working with, right? That I'm trusting
Yeah.
that company has the security things in mind. So that end-to-end encryption. So when one of my customers, logs into Bybee College Prep website and says, "Hey, I want to do a test prep boot camp," and then they plug in their credit card information, that information that goes through my it's encrypted. But you did some stuff in proving that even though that stuff is encrypted, it can still be decoded. Can you talk about that? Are you allowed, or is that where the CIA is going to come in and knock in a minute?
Hopefully not. We'll watch the windows, see if there's any helicopters flying around. No, yeah, I can definitely talk about that. Basically, there's a lot you can learn just by watching patterns of communication, whether this be between actual people and their cell phones, or whether this be within a data center or within a single computer, which is the context that I was studying this in. But for example, I forget who, but some general, I think, was someone high up in the US military, said we kill people based on metadata alone. So we actually don't need, and the CIA, actually the US government, the military, don't actually need to hear the content of conversations and see the content of texts in order to make these decisions of and figure out what's going on. They can actually just observe who's talking to who, for how long, at what times, so on and so forth. So there's a tremendous amount of information you can gain and learn from just watching patterns of communication, whether that be between people or whether that be within a single computer or even within a data center. And so what essentially the work that we were looking at is saying that, yeah, encryption isn't quite enough. If you can observe the pattern of communication happening within a certain computer, you can actually figure out with pretty high accuracy what data is being computed on and what computation is happening. So yeah, this is more or less the basis of how we built our attack.
Wow. So just by watching the patterns of what's happening in the transmissions.
Exactly.
It's crazy. I remember hearing a while back, I'm going to get this all wrong, about a computer that was hacked but was not connected to the internet. That was something about through the fan speed or something. Did you read that? Did you? So you don't know about that?
I haven't checked that out.
It was I can't I wish I had my producer over in the corner, but I don't have that. So to go find that article for me. Yeah, there was a story about a year ago about how they were able to get information off of a computer, and it was something about how the fan operated, because that told them whenever energy was spiking in the computer, and they were able to decode it. So I'll need to look that up. Okay, what's the post PhD plan, or is there a post PhD plan?
Yeah, this is still a plan in working, I think. I mean, it's still a plan I'm trying to fully develop. I think the thing that would give me the most personal fulfillment from my job alone would be to be a professor, to work in academia. I get a lot out of mentorship opportunities personally, and I really enjoy the research, and I really enjoy staying close to the sort of technical details of what I'm working on. So there's a lot that's attractive in an academic job in that regard. I still have to see sort of there's a lot of unpredictability when it comes to that. If you look at the number of PhDs that are graduated by the top CS programs across the US, there's about 40 to 50 PhD students graduating out of the top 20 programs each every year, and each one of them is hiring like 1 to 2, maybe 3 if it's a huge hiring year. So it's quite selective once you get to looking for academic jobs, and there's also things to have to consider long term, like work-life balance and family and all this kind of stuff. So there's a lot in play. I'm not sort of worrying about it too much at the moment. I'm more focusing on enjoying what I'm doing now, and enjoying the process, and becoming as good a researcher as I can. And then once we get there down the line, 5-6 years down the line, I'll be able to decide if I want to go into academia or maybe industry research or something along those lines.
Whenever we first set the interview up, I asked you, and I'm going to fanboy for just a minute, because one of my favorite podcasts is Lex Friedman, who he works at MIT. I don't know, he's a professor. He teaches there. Will you have a class with Lex Friedman? Will you, interact with him? He does AI and robotics, I think, so it may not be overlapping with what you're doing.
Yeah, no, Lex does fantastic stuff, and I'm a big fan of his podcast as well. I don't know that I'll have any classes with him.
Dang it.
Yeah, we'll see. I have to pick one class in the sort of AI/robotics track at some point. So I'll probably take that either next semester or the semester afterwards. And if he offers one, then that'd be fantastic. We'll see what happens.
So my old English teacher's a big fan of yours. I did reach out. I've emailed him, but I won't pester people with emails because they just end up like blocking you, and it doesn't matter. So send one email and then be done. And I'm terrible at writing an engaging email. So, all right. Okay. So you said one of the things I heard you say in that talking about UT and your program at UT is you had the opportunity really to work with maybe one primary professor and then maybe some other professors along the way. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
And that's such a, Sydney Rose, who was like episode 9 on the podcast, Sydney, she said that one of the things she got into UT's CAP program, but then she ended up staying at UT Arlington. And Sydney's comment was what won her over was when she was touring the campus, and the professor, one of the political science professors, because she knew she wanted to go to law school. We'll talk about that in a second too for you, because you and Sydney are kind of anomalies in like the thing that you started out to study is the thing you studied and the thing you're actually probably going to do for a living. Whereas a lot of people, most people, that's not how it works out. But Sydney said she's walking her through it. And the professor says, well, if you take my class, here's the book that we'll use. And it's my book. Here's a copy if you want it. And so he gave her a book. And that same professor, she's now taken like 3 classes with. He's become a big mentor for her, helping her figure out what else she needs to do or the next steps for her. And that's been, a super important thing for her, and it's going to help her because she's got that relationship now. When she gets ready to go to law school, she's going to have professors who can say, okay, this is the law school, and I know this person here, and that can guide her to where to apply and how to get started for her. But having that mentor relationship, a lot of students will say, make sure, Yazan, very first episode, Yazan said, I think you and Yazan were in the same class, said, go to office hours, like go in and talk with the professor, not just like make stuff up, but if you have something you're not understanding, go to office hours. That's what they want. But even more than that, you were able to cultivate a relationship with the professor and have that guide you through the choices that you made. So did UT throw like a bereavement party when you decided to go to MIT instead?
No, yeah, it was definitely. It was a bittersweet moment, I think. I felt, I actually still collaborate with some of my old advisors. We just submitted a paper for publication last week, a couple of weeks ago. So I'm still very much in touch with them and everything. But I think they knew that the best thing for me would be to go elsewhere and try and have different academic experience different research philosophies and see how research is done in different places. And I think that's fantastic advice. I would give it as well. I think it's important to get I think it's important to get a variety of different research styles and tastes under your belt, so you can develop your own.
So changing tacks a little bit then on just questions that, I can't remember if I taught you for 1 or 2 years. I know I taught you English 2. I think I taught you English 1, but you may have had News at that point.
No, I had you as well.
Oh, so it's 2 years. What were things like, because I remember I was helping you with SAT prep back. I mean, you were not lots. I remember you coming to me with like, hey, this question right here, I don't quite get. And we'd work through what that question meant. That's back on the old SAT too. But what were things in high school? Because you graduated top of your class, but you never struck me as the kind of student who was like, I got to get, there's plenty. I make the joke with parents, or with kids a lot of times, like those top 6% kids, the kids that are just cutthroat to get in the top 6%, they would shank somebody if that meant they would get one more rank. Like they're ruthless. But that was never you. Where did you graduate in your class? Because class had about 700 people in it. Do you remember where you graduated in high school? What rank was?
I was like 17, 18, something, okay. Somewhere in there.
And so that wasn't as big a thing for you, wasn't as huge a deal. But I mean, because I did teach you both years, because I'm remembering two particular people who will probably listen to this podcast, and they harassed you quite a bit. We may talk about them shortly.
Sounds good.
But shout out Kylie. They you never struck me as that kind of student. Were you like very grade conscious in high school? How did you approach high school?
Yeah, no, great question. I think yes, so I think how I approached grades in high school sort of evolved. My freshman year, I was kind of messing around a bit. I mean, yeah, I didn't have the same sort of focus that I had towards the end of high school. And so, yeah, my first year, my grades weren't as fantastic. I mean, they improved over the course of the 4 years. And but so I remember sort of at the end of the first year, I had this. My dream as a kid in high school was always to go to MIT, actually. And so I remember I had this conversation with my dad, and he said, like, Ariel, I think your grades are good, but if you want to sort of get to the next level, you have to, if you really want to go to MIT, you're going to have to work a bit harder to get your grades up even higher. And so I took that to heart and did work quite a bit harder from then on out. But one of the things that I really appreciate that my parents instilled in me is this sort of idea of balance and importance of balance. They throughout high school and always and up till now, I've always had sort of, I guess, three main parts to my life, I guess: music, sport, and academics. And I think that they always emphasized to me the importance of keeping all three up. And I think that's fantastic advice, because when one or even two of them aren't going well, then the other ones that are going well will sort of catch you. And so that's sort of what I mean when I say that I think a big part of the reason why I'm here at MIT is because I've sort of focused on other areas of my life and grown in other ways, specifically in physical fitness and in music and artistic development as well. So I definitely did work hard towards the end of high school. But I would say that I wasn't cutthroat because it wasn't my only focus. I remember high school with very fondly. It was a really warm experience, and I made some fantastic friends who I'm still lucky to be in touch with. But yeah, it didn't feel, yeah, I never felt like crazy pressure from the top from my parents or anything like that. I always sort of wanted to do well, and working for that wasn't a chore, I guess.
And so, and that's the big thing, because and this is almost a leading question, but I talk with parents a lot of times. What I hear a lot of times is a kid has a 4.0 but then a 1200 SAT, and parents will say to me, well, they just don't test well. I'm like, no, that's not it. Test anxiety is a real thing, but the test anxiety comes because you don't feel great about your knowledge of the material. And what I say to students, I'm kind of forcing this a little bit in this conversation, but focus on learning the material. And that's what I always felt like for you. You were really focused on, like, I know I got the wrong answer here, but why is the right answer right? What's the logic of that? And I talk with a lot of students who they learn how to answer questions. They learn, like, what is the teacher looking for? What do they want? And then I'm going to provide that. But I mean, and you were in the GT program, so at least my class was structured. I tried much more openly to let you say, okay, here's the things I'm interested in. How can I research those things and still learn what I need to learn about English? But that's what we tried to focus on in structuring the class. But I had plenty of students that sat near you who were, in fact, one that went to UT the same year you did, who were very, why did my answer's right? My answer is right. Like, and they would fight me on it. I'm like, it's not, I'm like, I can't tell you. It's you picked A and B is the right answer. And here's why B is the better answer for that. And that's the thing I stress to parents a lot of times is, look, focus on learning. Yeah, you can play the GPA game. It's great to play the GPA game, but at some point playing that GPA game is going to wear out. And you never struck me as someone who was doing that. You struck me as, what's going on now? This has just developed probably in the last 4 or 5 years, but now people are like taking health outside of like in another district, because they realize that if they do that, right, then that credit doesn't count in my GPA. Really? And I talked to the student yesterday, has a 102 GPA and is barely in the top 6%. Jeez. 102. And, think about what that means, like how many AP classes you're taking. And so if you're in that situation, I'm like, don't worry about that stuff. It will work out. And, but yeah, they're doing that. They're taking, like if they don't take, they're figuring out how to take, because think about that. If your GPA is like a 101 and you make a 100 in health is bringing your GPA down.
Yeah.
So if you go online and you take, now there's people who may be listening to this like, I never thought about, let's think, I'm guiding some people through this, right? But that's what's going on. People are doing that. And that's why the inflation, the last 5 years or so, the inflation of two things are happening for grade inflation. One thing is that people at the very top of the class are figuring out little things because the margin is so thin, little things they can do that, okay, that 100 is bringing my average down. So if it's going to bring my average down, then I'll do this other thing and that'll bring me back up, And then the other thing people are doing is there's so much pressure on teachers that if the student has, and there's so much pressure from parents on teachers about, you're going to ruin this 87 is going to ruin their future. No, it's not. It's not going to ruin if the 87, dude, my 6-year-old had a meltdown yesterday. We went to Sonic. Right. And that's just so Sonic, they chose Sonic because Sonic has better toys than Chick-fil-A. Not a shout out to Sonic or Chick-fil-A. I'm not 6. I don't care what your toys are, but that's why they wanted Sonic. So we go to Sonic for dinner. I bring dinner home. Well, he melts down because his brother got this one cactus creature that he really wanted, and he got a bracelet. It's just a bracelet. I didn't want the bracelet, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, buddy, if the worst thing that happens in your life is you didn't get the Sonic toy you wanted, you've got a pretty good life. Like, yeah, okay, that's a bad thing. But if that's the worst thing, so if the worst thing in your life is you make an 87 in AP World, if that's the worst thing, that's not, if that's going to completely derail your future, you've got other issues going on, right? There's other things happening. So that's, that to me, that's so crazy. Just don't focus on learning the material. Quit trying to figure out how you game. And dude, we can talk about people that you graduated with that majored in gaming the system, right? Yeah. Oh, you know them. They majored in like, what's the little thing I can do? Even after you, there was this one class everyone talked about because of who you graduated with, like this one particular cheating thing that happened that they were, that was terrible. And I was like, dude, that class has nothing on the class beneath them, because the class behind you guys, a group of students were on campus one weekend and they broke into a teacher's filing cabinet and took pictures of every test they were going to take that year. They figured out where the notebook of test was. They broke into the filing cabinet on the weekend when they were there. They were there for a school activity. And that's, yeah. And everyone was always like, and they were saying like, it's this one group, there's just so much pressure on the kids that they feel compelled to cheat. And I was like, it's not that group. It's this group over here. There's just overlap between those two groups. So, it was crazy. The stuff that goes on dude, can I even tell you what the cheating is like right now?
Really?
Kids are, oh man, it's unreal. Kids are all online and everybody's like, we have this debate going on for test prep people. They're like, because the whole thing is don't test kids this year. We shouldn't be testing kids this year. And I'm like, we've got to test kids this year because they ain't done a bit of work since March of last year. I can tell you what happened whenever the school said, hey, we're going to go pass fail this year. Like, there was not a race for kids to say, cool, I can finally explore what I want to explore. And really that was a race to the bottom. Like, what's the very least I have to do? And that's been every kids who have gone DVA this year, that's been huge. Like, okay, how can I Google? So the schools have had to go to no multiple choice tests. Everything's an at-home test. Everything's an open note test this year. We've got to figure out. And the only way you're going to figure out what kids actually know is if you have a third-party test that assesses this is what, and that's the only way you're going to be able to figure that out. Don't give me the crap about, the classroom teacher can give them an assessment and assess what they really know. No, they can't. I was a classroom teacher for 22 years. You love your kids. You love your kids. And so you're going to say, oh yeah. And when they don't quite do it, you're going to nudge them a little bit. You're going to do things that it's just not going to work. You've got to have a third-party test to do it. So let's talk about that for a little bit. So going into grad school, what did you have to do besides, you had an awesome, by the way, you mentioned you're published, you just submitted a paper for publication. You were published as an undergrad, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I was fortunate to have a publication with my two advisors and with an awesome team of grad students as well, who are super supportive. Can't be thankful enough for them.
And for the record, that's the longest rant I've ever done. It's the longest single rant I've ever done on a podcast episode. Congratulations for that record.
Thank you. Glad to have teased it out.
So you're published as an undergrad. What were the things you had to do? So every different school has different, if you go law school, it's LSAT. If you go medical school, it's MCAT. If you go a lot of business schools or a lot of MBAs, it's GMAT. What did you have to do for yours?
Yeah. So I can only really speak to the CS PhD application process, but one of the big realizations that I had, like coming towards the end of it, especially, is that grades don't really matter all that much come PhD application time. And there's some variance here because so firstly, I'll say the way the application works is that you submit usually a GRE score. Some schools don't even require it or even accept it anymore. You submit your GPA and your transcripts. You submit a statement, usually about 2 pages, 1 page front and back, which is your statement of purpose, what research you've done, what research you'd like to do, who you've worked with, who you'd like to work with, so on and so forth. And then you have some recommenders who write you letters of recommendation. The way that the process works is essentially there isn't like some set of admissions counselors or anything who are sort of reviewing your applications. The people actually reading your applications are the actual professors who you will be potentially working with. And so this means that they don't care about this, like, do you fit in with the culture of the school as much? It seems like you have to sort of, when you're writing your essays, you have to try to game the system a little bit when you're applying for undergrad. So it seems like there's less of that when you get to grad school. Really, and different professors look for different things, but in general, the most important thing are your letters of recommendation and any research that you may have published in your time in undergrad. Those are really the things that I think, on the whole, most professors focus on. Some professors care about GPA a little bit, some care about your writing ability a little bit, but in general, the main thing are letters of recommendation. So building this long-term relationship with a professor or 2 professors or more professors and getting some real research experience and showing them what you can do is tremendously important come application time.
I want to tease a couple of things out of what you said right there. First thing you said was GPA isn't as big a factor. Is it not as big a factor because it's not important to professors, or is it not as big a factor because everyone you're competing against has the same GPA?
So I'd say the former. So GPA, like the fact that you can do well in classes does not say anything about your ability to do well in research. Research is much more open-ended. I spent the last 6 months trying to figure out the right problem to work on, not even really doing any real work. And I'm doing this with I'm fortunate to be working with a team of like fantastic professors in my area who are world experts, and we've been trying to figure out the right problem to work on. So it's the skills you need to do well in research and the resilience you need to do well in research is completely different from what you need to do well in classes. So really, GPA is a poor indicator in general of your performance in grad school. So that's one thing. I think the professors don't care about it as much because it doesn't tell them much. I'd say, that being said, a lot of people do end up having high GPAs when they get into these top places, but it's by no means everyone. I think one of the nice things about this process is that since the letters of recommendation matter so much, they can really sort of catch you, I guess. Like if there's some hole in your application, like I have a terrible GPA, but I spent all 4 years working really hard with one professor and got 2 publications, the letters of recommendation can really sort of save you. If the professor says something like, this is the best undergrad I've worked with in 10 years, or this is within the top 1% of undergrads I've ever worked with, that's what the professors who are admitting you are really looking for. If someone who is an expert in the field can vouch for you as a researcher, that's the best indication that they'll get that you'll be a successful researcher when you're with them.
So much more important than about picking out like the school where you can be one of the top students at that school, because that's
Mm,
going to give you. It does sound like the professor too is part of their criteria is this a kid I want to mentor? Is this a PhD? Because how many
yeah.
PhD students are in your cohort?
Yeah. So within my overall cohort at MIT, I think within the computer science department, there's like 50-ish, I think.
Okay.
So it's a small program, maybe 50 or 60. I don't know the numbers exactly. Within my
50
lab,
for 50 first year or 50 total, like working on their PhD?
50 first year in my
Okay.
cohort. Yeah.
That's bigger than I thought it would have been.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And yeah, it's around that number. And within my lab specifically, I'm sort of in a unique. So I'd say in most labs, unless you're working in artificial intelligence, you can usually expect like 4 to 6 students per professor. I'm in sort of a unique lab, which is really cool. And one of the reasons I came here, which has 14 students and 5 professors, and everyone works with everyone. So there's a lot more face-to-face time with these professors. You get a lot more mentorship, and that's something that I really enjoy about being here.
How does what your group, you said the AI was like it's 4 or 5 to a professor, yours is different. What is yours labeled
Yeah,
or called?
yeah. So sorry. AI is probably like a lot more than 4 or 5. AI is a super competitive and super like hot field at the moment.
Hmm.
So you can oftentimes expect like 20 to 40 students per professor,
Okay.
which is a lot more in AI.
You may have
In
said
my
that and I just didn't follow.
No, you're good. You're good. But yeah, in my field is generally systems, is what we call it, computer systems.
Okay.
Um, Within that, I'm specializing in operating systems and a bit in security as well. Generally, these groups seem to tend to be smaller, like 4 students to a professor. And again, I'm in sort of this unique, awesome position where it's like 14 grad students to 5 professors. So
Okay. You mentioned a minute ago, you spent 6 months just figuring out what kind of problem you were going to solve.
mm,
Um, what was that process? Because that had to be frustrating, especially since you've been
yeah.
through. We talked about that a minute ago, but like, was it ever frustrating? I guess is the first question.
100%, yeah. And I mean, it's still ongoing. We still have to figure out nail down exactly what we're going to work on, and we're getting close. But yeah, it's definitely frustrating. It's emotionally difficult at times. I mean, so you sort of come out of, or I came out of undergrad, sort of really excited, like, oh yes, I got into MIT. This is awesome. I had like a bit of success in my research in undergrad. I'm an expert. I'm going to come and kill it. Published 10 papers in my first year. Not quite, but I sort of came in with a lot of energy, and it's sort of, this is my first time. So this is my first time picking a project completely from scratch and leading a project completely from scratch. And it was a bit daunting a little bit to spend 6 months where you sort of have your hands tied. You like to do something, but there isn't really that much to do. It's a lot of reading and a lot of discussing. I was very lucky in that I get along really well with my advisor here. He's incredibly supportive, and we had great support. I had great support from the other professors in the group as well. So we'd meet for about an hour and a half twice a week, all of last semester, and we continue doing that this semester. And we'd have these sort of great discussions and about what we want to work on. And yeah, it's absolutely frustrating at times and emotionally difficult at times to feel like you want to show progress and sort of not the direction in which to progress is not always clear. So
What's the frustration you're feeling?
yeah, I mean, I'd like to sort of show my advisor that I was a good hire, I guess, in some sense. I'd like to yeah, I'd like to sort of do well, and I'm awesome to have. It's awesome that I get to work with fantastic collaborators, and I see other people in the lab doing fantastic things, and I'd like to also be able to sort of yeah feel like I have more, like the path to a publication or to sort of the ultimate goal is clearer. But it isn't always clear. A large part, an important part of the process is just playing around with new technologies and seeing and sort of discovering what the real issues are. And I think there's no real way to do that other than having this sort of downtime where you're just trying out a few things and pushing in a few different directions and seeing what works and what doesn't.
So the frustration, I think I used the word frustration. I meant to use the word emotion, but because I'll come back to that in a second. The frustration then is that you want to be making progress, and then you feel like suddenly you're not making any progress. And for 6 months, you feel like you're spinning your wheels. Am I hearing kind of like there's nothing moving forward? Yeah. Emotionally, like what were the emotional things that went on? If you're comfortable talking about that.
Completely, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a lot of frustration is a big one. There's definitely. I mean, people talk about imposter syndrome, like this sort of idea of, did I sort of trick someone in order to get in here? Am I an imposter? And that definitely comes up sometimes. I think it's something that everyone deals with, and I'm lucky to have faculty mentors that I've worked with in the past and at other universities even that I've chatted to throughout this application process. And it seems to be an issue for everyone. So there's definitely been
I specifically wanted to ask on that because I just to run through some resume stuff real quick, right? You graduated 1617 out of 700 at an extremely competitive high school. You went to a honors program that's one of the best computer science programs in the country, and you were in the honors program at that. So you were among the top 10% students at that. You're in a PhD program at what is probably the #1 research institution in the world, and you're a PhD student who sometimes has imposter syndrome. So if anyone ever shouldn't have felt imposter syndrome, it's you, and yet it's still there, right? It's still very real.
It is, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, it's no, I'm tremendously lucky to have had many opportunities and many people to guide me along the way. But yeah, no, definitely there's imposter syndrome. I think it's something that everyone deals with. I think it's part of this this process of being in academia, is you're constantly being faced with the limits of your intellectual ability and encountering them and trying to push them further and move them. So this is, I think, part of the process.
You talked a little bit earlier about you play, like, music and sports are important to you. What music? What? Because you were in marching band in high school, right?
Yeah, I was a huge band geek in high school. I played piano in the jazz band all 4 years. I played French horn in the concert band.
And your jazz band was one of the best jazz bands in the country, high school jazz bands. Were you with the group that like went to Ellington and stuff?
No, they went right before my 2 years in the top jazz band and right after my 2 years in the top jazz band. So maybe there's some correlation here. But no, it was fantastic. I was lucky to play with some incredible musicians who are now doing fantastic things as well. So yeah, definitely very lucky to have that opportunity.
Was Austin in your group? Woolsey?
Austin, yes, he was I think my last year or last 2 years.
Because you're so. So you play piano? Anything else? What do you play besides piano?
Yeah, I played French horn in marching band and the marching version of the French horn in marching band, and I played French horn in concert band as well. So band all around for sure.
Okay. And then what sports?
I play a lot of soccer now. I mean, I'm Mexican, so I think I'd lose my passport if I didn't play soccer. But yeah, so soccer's been a big one. I do a lot of like weightlifting and just general physical fitness stuff now. And I love to go hiking and get outdoors a little bit as well. So I'll really play anything that people are playing. But if I had to pick, soccer would be #1 for sure.
Okay. Soccer, I mean, one of the questions I like to ask people, so we've already talked a little bit about like what are things you thought were going to matter that didn't, and we talked a little bit about that, kind of hit on that. That's usually people talking about like we get to, my test scores were going to be big, and they for you were because you were, but at the same time, my bigger thing is what are things maybe that you wish you would have had that became very important but really weren't stressed to you as important whenever you were in high school and maybe even in college itself?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the big things is the joy of learning and this idea of just following your curiosity. You touched on it in a short rant earlier, but GPA this GPA has become such a rat race now, and people seem to be optimizing just for that, and that's such a shame that that's become the goal of education in a lot of great educational institutions. But especially now when I have complete freedom, I'm sort of relearning how to motivate myself in some ways. And And given the opportunity, I'm learning to take the opportunity to explore my curiosity and just sort of let my curiosity pull me along wherever it wants to take me. So I think really enjoying the feeling and the joy of learning and the challenge of learning, I think is really important. It's not something that I did as much as I would like to in high school. It's something that I got better at in college, and it's something that I'm continuing to get better at here and trying to get better at here.
I met with a student yesterday, actually, in a consultation, and I talked to him. He listed MIT. MIT is the dream school, and he listed that. And I told him about this podcast coming up that I was talking to you today, and I think that's part of it, right? That yeah, they want to see that you made good grades, and they want to see that you did that, but they want also to get a feel for what kind of investigative learner are you going to be. Yeah. I don't love the word. The buzzword nowadays to talk about kids as learners. They're a learner. We want them to be lifelong learners. And I'm like, the people who do that and they stress it, I feel like it's so. My interview tomorrow or Friday is going to be the fun one because it's a student who's been very politically active, and my rock solid West Texas roots are. It's going to be interesting to see the immovable force or the irresistible force and the immovable object whenever the two of us talk on Friday.
I bet.
But anytime an educator starts talking about, well, the learners in your class, what are the learners in your class? I'm like, stop forcing that crap on me. Okay. I get what you're after, but if that's a fundamental thing for me, I don't know. Words have power. I believe that. So I get so conflicted on so much of this stuff. Kylie and I had lunch. So I mentioned Kylie earlier. I told you when we first set this up, it's the first time Kylie and I had ever had lunch and had a lengthy conversation, and you didn't come up. So maybe she's moved past it. But because I mean, she and Haley were always Ariel. But Kylie and I, because Kylie's been pretty. I don't want to use the term derogatorily, but that woke idea and that mentality we have going on. And Kylie's been very active and stuff in her community about it. And so, she and I were talking about it because, dude, I'm 51. Like, I'm Popeye at this point, right? I am what I am. And my whole guiding philosophy is just don't be an asshole. I really want that. That's my big thing, right? And I know I still am sometimes. I don't mean to be. Maybe there are times, but so okay. I don't know where that totally was going, but that's kind of the idea of the learners. You have learners in your room, and I feel like when people start forcing that on you, and it's always some central administrative person who went to a workshop, and that's what was stressed at the workshop, and we're going to do that in ours because we're gonna and they're removed from the frontline stuff of what happens in the classroom. And if you'll open up the classroom so people can encourage kids to learn, everything else will take care of itself. The test scores will come up, all of that will happen. But instead, when a measurement becomes a target, it ceases to measure.
Definitely.
So, that's that's how, and back to the whole idea of why we need the tests in. So you talked about learning, like that, the ability to learn and having the time to learn. What's something that didn't happen that might have made a difference for you? I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, you're at kind of the top of the game. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was very lucky to have some awesome opportunities and awesome mentors all along the way. And something that didn't happen for me. I mean, I think this is something that people don't talk about enough, and that is important to talk about, especially. I definitely had my fair share of failures. I think this is something that needs to be stressed more, and people should ask people, how did you fail last? Or like, tell me about some of your worst failures. I mean, I was on 3-4 research projects that completely tanked before I was on my successful one. And I mean, there were just structural issues, and yeah, I mean, so I was on failed research projects. My first test in college was in discrete math, which is basically an intro to theoretical computer science. This is the first math test that I ever failed. I got like a 30% or something like that, 40%. And I was below the class average, which was an adjustment as well. I ended up getting a B in that class. That was as a freshman, first semester kid who had this dream of going to MIT for grad school. This was a big blow for sure. I had a soccer injury.
Should you have been taking that class, or was that a class that maybe was a junior level class and you took it just a little early?
No,
or
no,
is it an entry level?
It's an entry level theory class.
Wow.
I think that we just, in American high schools in general, they don't teach math, like high level math. Like we teach very computational math, like calculus, how to do integrals, how to do very, very computational work. But this is very proof based, so this is like proper, more theoretical math, and I just didn't know how to structure proof arguments. That's never something I'd had to do in high school, and it was new. It was hard for a year, and then I sort of figured it out a bit better. So yeah, definitely it was just a big adjustment there. Yeah, I was on failed research projects. I had a soccer knee injury. I dislocated my patella, and then like a 2 centimeter chunk of bone came off the back of it. And I won't get too much into the gory details, but I had to have surgery. I had to have a rehab for that. I mean, that's the reason why I work out every day, is because I want to continue being able to play soccer, and that sort of ongoing rehab is really important for that. How else did I fail?
I was asking about the failed research project. So how did you know it just wasn't going to work? Like what happened when you knew it wasn't going to work?
Yeah, so this was, there were two notable ones, I think. Probably one of the first couple ones that I worked on, the professor just sort of said, so for one of them, we had been kind of scooped. Like there was another institution which had published some work which is very similar to what we wanted to do. I think the reason why we didn't catch this early is because the grad student who was leading the project wanted to do some work in the IoT space, Internet of Things. And this is not an area that my advisor was well read in. It's not his area of interest. So we had sort of structural issues in the sense that no one sort of knew the field well enough to know what had been done and what hadn't been done until it was a bit too late, until we'd already done a bit of work on it, unfortunately. So it just didn't pan out in the end. And this was, I think, the advisor and the grad students called together. They sort of decided, oh, well, this is something we have to move on from. So that was one. There was one where there was actually on the main successful research project, there was a long period of failure as well. We had sent it in for publication, did not get in the first time, which is tough, but we were resubmitting it again. And then like right when we started getting ready to like rework the paper, we had about five months to redo it. Everything stopped. All of my part of the paper stopped working. It, like a switch had been flipped, and there were ended up being some subtle errors in how we had been measuring things, and it took us like 3 or 4 months as a group, like the Emmett professor, and then the 3 or 4 grad students on the project, and myself were all sort of discussing and trying to figure out what was going on, what had gone wrong, and it ended up being something really subtle. We figured it out, but that was stressful for a bit, for sure.
Okay, that's great. So that conversation, whenever it suddenly wasn't working anymore, start thinking like, what the did you do? You know, moving past that, and that's I think that is definitely something kids don't have a chance to fail. Like if you feel like that 87 in AP World is just life ending, you know, and when it's not, there's just not that opportunity to fail anymore.
And I think one of the big things is that we don't see people who we perceive as successful, we don't see their failures, and either they don't talk about them or we don't ask about them enough. I think that's something that we need to do, because one of the big realizations I've had is that there's no like, this is the failure that like ended my career. Like there's no point where like, if I screw this up, I'm never going to go to a good grad school or something like that. It's a lot more of a continuous spectrum than that. There's no failure that's too great to come back from. I mean, the most successful people out there have all had the biggest failures you could possibly imagine, whether or not they talk about them. And I think it's good to sort of remind ourselves that, all right, I screwed up, but this isn't the end of of the world, I can still recover.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. That's probably a really good place for us to kind of wrap up. Thank you so much for spending an hour talking with me today.
Anytime,
Love
my
it.
pleasure.
Love talking, man. But next time you're back here, I want to get lunch again and
Love
figure
to.
out. You showed me a great restaurant last time, so we'll figure out the next place to go next time.
I'd love to. Yeah, we'll do it.
But always open. Is there? I mean, a lot of times, like Eric, who I met with on Monday, he has some stuff going on that's social media wise. You're not you're a social media kind of person, I don't think. Is there anything out there you want to plug as far as projects that you're working on that might be social media related? Anything like that going on?
Nothing really on social media. I have a website where I put up my research. So if it's not too boring, if people want to check out what I'm doing, it's arielszekay.com. So
do you spell CK or do you spell out your last name?
Letter C, letter K. So arielck.com.
Dangerous, dangerous dude.
Dangerous territory. But no, thanks so much for having me. This has been fantastic.
I love it. I appreciate it, man.
Enjoyed chatting as always.
So it's arielck.com?
.com.
Okay, cool. Very good, man. All right. Awesome. Thank you so much, Ariel. I appreciate it.
Thanks, you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the podcast, it would help us reach more people if you could rate and review the show wherever you listen and share it on social media. If you have ideas for future episodes, please email me at shane@biblecollegeprep.com. Thanks for listening.